Welcome back to the BlackLetter podcast. We set out to create an entertaining and exciting podcast about law and business, and I think we've done it. BlackLetter, the name, comes from the Gothic typeset that was originally used in the Gutenberg press. Over time, BlackLetter became the only font that English law books were printed in. Everything else was printed in regular type. It made it harder for kind of the common person to understand what the English law books said. BlackLetter came to represent something that was law, that was set in stone, that was sort of old and a well-settled fundamental principle of law. We're here to demystify BlackLetter law. We're here to demystify things that happen in business and law and where those two meet. And I hope you have fun listening. Hi, welcome back to the BlackLetter podcast. I'm Tom Dunlap, your BlackLetter host. This month, we're celebrating January with an entertainment and media podcast. I've got with me Kurt Klaus, a partner at Dunlap, Bennett & Ludwig. Kurt runs the practice there, has industry experience and law experience both wrapped into one package. And then I've got with me Mikail Chowdhury. Mikail is both an attorney in the United States, a solicitor in the UK, which is another word for lawyer. And there's a lot of other words for a lawyer, but that's a nice one. And he's also a film producer, creator, director. He's doing an independent film project right now. And that's what we're going to talk about today. Mikail's project. We're going to get some advice from Kurt on challenges Mikail's faced. And they met in Washington, D.C. at the Woman in Film event where Kurt was a speaker. And with that, I'm going to start by asking Kurt if you would first just introduce yourself, tell us a little bit about your background. Sure. And then we'll jump over to Mikail.
Yeah, thanks, Tom. Kurt Klaus. I have been a lawyer for only 25, 26 years now, but I've been involved in entertainment for almost 40 years. Prior to the practice of law, I worked in recording studios and worked on commercials in Nashville, Tennessee, and then got into feature film production work. I worked on about 4 feature films. And from that, then went on to get a master's in advertising because a lot of the clients I was shooting commercials for had issues that arose, and I was just curious about it and decided to research the creative process and the creative management and what research goes into making a great commercial. After that, law school, and have been working in entertainment in Nashville and later as an executive in a media company, and now back in the private practice of law in the Washington, D.C. area. But still hold 5 jurisdictions where I'm licensed to practice, including Tennessee, New York, Connecticut, Maryland, and Washington, D.C.
All right, great. And Kurt, what was the studio that you worked for? What media company were you at?
So there was a company called Southern Productions, and Southern Productions is located right down in the heart of what's called the Gulch of Nashville. The building no longer stands there, but the Gulch is a really hot area right now. And we had, I guess, a full-blown 3D animation studio, a lot of high-end editing, and there were 4 or 5 staff involved. And our clients were mostly national and regional clients.
The Gulch, though, I feel like they should maybe reconsider the branding.
Yeah.
Come to the Gulch.
Go to the Gulch.
Hang out at the Gulch. So, Mikail, why don't you give us a little bit about yourself? I know you're a former actor as well, so you can feel free to ham it up and sell yourself as much as you want. But tell us a little bit about your background and what you're working on.
Sure. Well, thank you for having me, and thanks for that introduction. I feel quite undeveloped compared to Kurt's CV, a resume that he just had there. But yeah, so I actually started off, well, currently I am an attorney. I'm assistant general counsel with Sodexo for North America, which is a global business. I started with them in the UK about 10 years ago, then was at their group HQ in Paris, and have been out here in the US for about 3 years now, which is great. My background originally in performance was music, actually, and then I did acting in stage stuff when I was at college. Moved into writing and directing theatre. And then when I was sort of in my 20s, I went and made a few things, including a sort of a zero-budget guerrilla feature, which ended up in a couple of film festivals in the States, had a couple of theatrical screenings in the UK and LA and New York as well.
So did you have actual gorillas in it?
No, they were student actors, so they might as well have been in terms of the point. No, I shouldn't say that. They're all friends of mine. Many of them still friends of mine. That film, by the way,
until now.
Yeah, until now.
Called them.
Yeah, that film, by the way, although it is listed on IMDb and the BFI catalog and everything like that, there's no copies online as I'm aware of so far, because I don't want anybody to ever watch it.
So what's the name of the film?
It's called The Party.
The Party.
Yeah, which means it hides conveniently because there are so many films called The Party.
A couple other films with that name.
Yeah, so we get away with it for that one. But yeah, that one, it was a very student thing, but it was a great experience because I had to go with a budget of less than $1,000, had to go and manage to get hold of some gear, had to go and get a cast in, had to write a screenplay, which I'd never written before, did it, and then had to edit it. I mean, it's a whole, and as an exercise, it's one of those things you could romanticize it when you're younger, though it wasn't that much fun. We were like, had to sneak into like the editing suite of the art college that a mate of mine gave me the code to get into because he was studying there, and you had to go in before class started at 6 a.m. and then after it closed in the evening and do it. So everything was a learning exercise, but it was a great thing to do because then you got everything. You had to do it all. You had to do it all from scratch. Had to pick it up on the way. But in parallel to that, and then doing some stuff, and I had a couple of scripts in LA, which again quite a long time ago, but one was optioned, then not optioned, another one was almost optioned. And in parallel to that, I was becoming a lawyer, and so I'd done a law degree at college. I'd always wanted to be a lawyer, and I have a background which includes Bangladeshi and South Asian. So there was also an impetus to get a real job and a proper profession. So I had to do that. So I did. So over the years, I then went back and forth between kind of pursuing the law career, doing law college in the UK, law school, going through everything, qualifying, doing that. And then periodically I'd do sort of more theater, or I'd make a couple of short films. So I did a couple of short films as well, one which I produced and co-directed, one which I sort of wrote, one which I AD'd on and things, and had a couple of plays on as well while I was being a lawyer and doing that as well. So yeah, it's kind of been in parallel. One takes a little more than the other, and did that. And then and then the last few years came to DC, and it is a credit to the people in DC and the States generally that I came over without any contacts here, without knowing anybody, and expected to just be sort of focusing purely on the job and not really doing anything else of that, and ended up managing to fall into some stuff. I made one of my very good friends is a guy called Paul Wharton. He's a TV lifestyle expert. He produced a show on MTV called Made many years ago, and I helped him edit a book he was doing because I said I'm a writer and have done that. And we ended up actually producing a lifestyle special, a holiday special, about a year and a half ago with Patti LaBelle, which was great. Yeah, we got nominated for an Emmy for the Capitals for that.
That's fantastic. Cool. So you're an Emmy-nominated producer.
Yeah, which I guess you would say, technically, it all sounds very cool when you say it out loud. And then the whole time.
That's what we're all about, right?
Making it sound cool. Yeah. But I just think I'm really lucky because, I think
we need to lead with that Emmy-nominated producer, Mikail Chowdhury. Yeah.
It all feels a bit funny. I've just been very lucky because I think it as well. I do like being a lawyer. I like being an attorney. I work for a great company. I really have a good time with that. And it's really lucky to be able to do that.
Do you think they're watching this?
Is that what I'm saying? Yeah, there are a few of them. People can't see this, but there are people behind the camera watching me right now.
Right, and they're reporting.
Reporting it back on that.
They have like little Sodexo
just keep it
on their shirt.
We're all bugged, naturally. There's a tracker.
Doesn't need the cue cards, right?
So Mikail, what are you working on right now? So you and Kurt met at Woman in Film Festival in Washington. And you were working on a film project, an independent film project, I think. Is that right?
Yeah, that's right. So
tell us about that a little bit.
Sure. Yeah. So, and the Women of Film video, that they have a conference every year called Script DC, which was great. And I have to say, a credit to your firm because you guys do a talk at that event. And there was one on equity financing, which was interesting to me because I'm working on this feature project, which I'm trying to get made. And I think you were supposed to do it, but you had a conflict with court and things like that. But Kurt stepped in and did a great talk. So we had a chat afterwards, and that's how we had it. So thank you again for sharing, the knowledge that you guys have, which is useful. The project that I'm working on it's based on a true story. It's a feature-length drama based on the true story of a friend of mine, or someone I know very well from high school. And they were actually forced into a marriage when they were a teenager, which they didn't want to have. And there's a whole story around it where essentially they took these steps to...
As a teenager, they were forced into a marriage?
Exactly.
In what country was this?
So they were in the UK, but they're originally from South Asia. And
they're not allowed to do that in the UK, are they?
You're not allowed to, but it's a really interesting point that brings up, which is why I think...
I just totally took a right turn.
No.
I'm very curious.
But go with it. And it's really interesting because I think that's why the story really actually appealed to me. And that's why actually I feel a lot of impetus to try to make it. As much as it always sounds... Creatives go like, I felt the pressure to make the story. And I never want to be that guy who's like, it called to me in the night. No, I mean, I'm not, and there are friends of mine who say stuff like that. And they're very nice, but
just don't say that.
Say that.
Just let it be implied and then let people draw their own conclusions. A friend of mine, high school, forced marriage. I think
exactly.
It speaks to you.
Exactly. Sure. It's something that's there and it's incredible. And I, and the truth is that this is something that actually happens more than I think we realize. And it's cross-cultural in a weird way. So we have, although she comes from a South Asian background and there was a thing where there's always, I think, various cultures where parents want their kids to marry certain types of people. That's a standard thing across the line.
But generally in the US, at least, you can't make them do that.
Can't.
Right? In fact, usually kids go the other way.
Yeah.
They're like, nope, not doing that.
It's just a hard cultural tie at the familial reputation, those types of things is causing it to be forced. Although it's not sanctioned by the government. It's forced in a different way.
Yeah.
And that's what the film's about.
Yeah, you're completely right. I mean, this is the thing. You can't account for the family pressure that comes onto it. So obviously no one's legally forcing them to marry.
I see.
No one's doing that. It's a case that she is, and in this particular culture then, and I think it cuts across a lot of cultures actually, but in this case then what happened was there was expectation to go back to the country where her parents were from, and then marry someone who was essentially going to be sort of in the village and they had known for a long time and it was just expected and that was it. And the big fear was that, well, if they don't do that, then they're going to go off and do something crazy and then it'll bring a lot of embarrassment to everything. Or what if they just go nuts? Or what if this happens? It's not respectable. It's not appropriate. It's not all these things. And the really interesting thing on the story-wise is when I then talk to people, lots of different people about it, it's amazing how many parallels there are to other groups, which are not just, it's not even about continent or anything like that. There are people I know and have found actually in America who are from certain parts and certain states in America where it's been pretty common. They're like, well, no, but there was a lot of pressure actually. You're just gonna get married to someone around here.
Wow.
And this is what's going to happen.
Yeah.
And they didn't really know a way out. And if they, they felt they could do other things. In the UK, you have it as well. There are issues where, if you're raised in an area where, and I'm bringing it to America or the UK, but if you're raised in an area where all you know and the only access you have to is the people around you and where that is, and most people never even get to leave the state, perhaps not even the county that much, where you're in, you don't know anything else. And you don't have an understanding of what there is there and whether you want something or not, or what your actual desire is there. And the real tragedy of it is that it's not that it never works out, but the real tragedy is the loss of potential. And that's what the film really is about. The story for me, it's someone who had, as a kid, as a teenager, has all the potential of their entire life to go ahead. You've got everything ahead of you and it gets snatched away because you're told, no, you're moved. This is what you're going to do now. This is what you have to do. And they never have the chance to grow and develop.
Are these people of stature that we're talking about? I mean, is it you get married to either elevate your stature or the individual that you're marrying needs to elevate their stature? Or the people that are the real life people of your film, is that an element, or are they just everyday people, or even below?
In that case, it wasn't anything to do with that at all. It was just everyday people. It wasn't like families coming together. It wasn't this. It was just standard. It was tradition. It was accepted that this is just how it's done, and everybody always does it, and that's what it is.
So let me ask, and just to get us a little on the kind of the legal topic and the challenges you face. So to me, it sounds like challenge number one is getting life rights, right, from her, permission, and then permission from everybody else involved. Did you shoot this as a documentary? Was that the challenge, or is this kind of a fictional retelling? Like what direction and what challenges did you face in terms of IP? Because again, anytime you're taking somebody's personal story, did you use their real name? So these are the questions that I have from a lawyers and the creative process. It's interesting. I told you earlier, I do a panel at Sundance every year, and we have all these producers and writers on the panel, and it's called Legal Challenges in Independent Film. 90% of the show is, well, let me tell you about my film. Let me tell you about what happens in my film, the creative process. But the panel is called Legal Challenge. We get to the legal challenges, but it takes, and certainly we've got to talk about the background so people are interested for sure. But what are the challenges that you faced, or the challenges you foresee that are coming up? And then maybe we can talk about how you have dealt with them or will deal with them.
Yeah, and that would be great. And you're completely right. And there is a real advantage to being a lawyer as well when you do this. Yeah. Because, you do understand that there's a lot of stuff just doesn't matter. It's just irrelevant.
It's not irrelevant. Certainly people are interested in it and the backstory is super important, but there is
it's true.
From a lawyer's perspective, well, legally, it doesn't really matter whether she was your friend or not your friend. Did you get something signed?
Exactly.
That's the producer's hat. Get the film made. The lawyer's hat is protect.
Yeah. So let's put the producer's hat on. We'll put the producer's hat on you and the lawyer's hat on you.
No, completely. We'll do that. So, so you're completely right. So first thing I thought is obviously option rights, got to have the person on board. So what happened in her story is a little bit unique as well in terms of elements, which I won't go into here. But but because of that, that's what drew me to it. It isn't just someone who was forced out of this. There's a little more to it. And so I went and asked her if she would give me the story, and she did. And I actually wrote up an outline initially. And my advice, if anyone's trying to do it, my advice would be to try to bring the person on board as much as you can. Because as you say, it's about life rights. You have to respect that person and you have to get them on there, because being producer/lawyer, you want them to be, you want their story and you want control of it. But at the same time, you also want them to play ball and to be amicable.
So did she ultimately sign a release giving you the rights, or giving the production company the rights?
Yeah, she's giving that. Yeah, and and what I did though is and in this case, and this isn't going to apply to everybody, because in this case she especially didn't want to. She doesn't want her name on it, and she doesn't want it to be immediately traced to her in that way. I see. Because there's still family. It's not that she's ashamed or anything.
So it's anonymized. You've changed the names. It's the story, but it's an anonymized version of the story.
And I've also taken it as a bit of a slice of the period. So in terms of doing it, so what I'm not doing is doing a kind of, start from childhood and work the way through. It's taken from a particular spot in time. And I've taken a lot of liberties with a lot of things that are in there. I've changed a lot of stuff. And so to make sure she was okay, I actually wrote a short film screenplay for it. Very short, it's about 10 pages, and to show this is what I'm thinking to do with the feature.
Plot outline kind of thing.
Precisely. Yeah. And send it to her, and I said, are you okay with me if I take this direction? It's very different to you, and it's very different to all these things. And also, I also made it clear, this is a narrative, so as you're writing it or developing it, it may change a lot more. Mm-hmm. It's not designed to reflect exact moments of the life. So I had a certain advantage with this one. You're not making like Concussion or something like that, where you've got to really reflect the people that are there. In this case, I actually have got the license to kind of do what I want with the character.
It's a fictionalized account of a real story, yeah.
So she's a collaborator with you in the essence of the production and contributing her story and having signed off on life story rights to the extent that that's applicable. But is she also a collaborator with you as a co-author? I mean, you have a co-written.
She doesn't want it traceable. I'm guessing she's not in the credits.
Exactly. No,
she has a pseudonym or something.
So that would actually be another contract issue, right? Your agreement to keep her involvement confidential.
Yeah, which is actually, and that's a good question. So, in fact, you guys could maybe give me some extra, because I've got a clear idea on how I want to do it from a legal perspective, but I'm not an entertainment lawyer. So the question is this: so we've got her. She's giving the release. She's happy to allow that to go. And of course, at the beginning of any situation, as anybody knows, at the beginning of a thing, everyone gets on really well. Everyone's friends, and it's all great. And she's done that, and I will be very respectful to what she wants out of this. But at the same time, I think my view is that I think she deserves to have a credit on there. It won't be a co-author or co-writer because of the nature of the contribution, but to have some kind of recognition. I think a pseudonym would probably work if that's acceptable,
or you could do a production credit or something like that with her real name, but then that's up to her.
Precisely.
I think you need a waiver from her, at least saying, you decide what you want to do. I'll offer you X, Y, or Z.
Right.
And then you need a complete indemnification liability release for whatever comes of this.
The attribution then wouldn't go to her as a co-author in the writing form or in the creative aspect. It would just go to hers kind of like involved with the collaboration and the concept of the film and the overall, I guess, what she's bringing to the film outside of the creative process. Because if she was involved in the creative process and the writing, like, reading over a script and something more perhaps than fine tuning, you might get into a situation where there would be claims of some sort of copyright ownership.
And so you could have the copyright ownership. I would get it regardless. I would get an assignment of copyright from her. If she's participating at all in editing the script, because she does become a copyright owner in part, and you could register her as an author as a Jane Doe. You can register under a pseudonym as anonymous. The U.S. Copyright Office allows for that, and the Berne Convention recognizes it, of course, in the UK.
I was going to say,
as well.
The UK,
so
right, yeah, and our copyright laws here, of course, extend from the Queen of Anne, right? The Queen Anne documents way back when, in the UK. So very, very similar, right?
They do, but I would say though, in copyright in the US, there are some big differences. And I think,
we have a statutory scheme and enforcement provisions and attorney's fees, which you guys, I had a case in the UK against Disney, and you don't have those.
No, we don't. Right.
Nor do you have work for hire.
Nor do you have the American rule on attorney's fees, which makes it all very risky.
That's right.
So the English rule on attorney's fees makes challenging Disney quite challenging.
It can be. Yeah.
We every time I showed up for that case in the UK, Disney had roughly 6 barrister and 3 or 4 solicitors and corporate counsel. Wow, if we lose, that's a really expensive hour that we just spent in court. So sort of interesting. Anyway, sorry, we digress. So so we know roughly the background of your project. Where are you in the production process? How far along are you?
Sure. So I'm in early development.
Okay.
I've just finished the first draft of the screenplay, which will need a ton of work because it's a first draft, always does. But I've got actually 2 potential investors, and one of whom in particular really wants to come on board in a capacity as well to partner. And he's very open as to how he comes on board. He's very much, look, he's a businessman who does various different ventures, very nice guy. He loved the concept when I talked to him initially, and it came out by accident, and it turned out that he had almost invested in film a few years ago. And then didn't, because he didn't buy into the team and the concept, but he loved this. He's been interested in it for several months now. As it's starting to progress, he said, well, look, I want to be involved. This is what I can bring, but where would you need me, essentially, in that? What capacity would that be? How would that go? And then another person who's interested in investing, really just financially. They're like, okay, this is something I'm interested in. I appreciate it may not make money, but I'm willing to go into it.
Are you going equity, non-equity? Like, what are you doing for actors? What are you doing for? So I understand financing. Have you thought about where you're going to film it and what credits you can get and production schedule? Because that's another thing. Those credits, I don't know if you know, but they go away very quickly. They get signed up for very quickly, and you have to kind of jump on those regional shooting credits and film credits early. So have you thought about any of that, or is that too much?
No, so it's not too much at all. So I have thought about it. I think so in all this, and again, when you're a lawyer, obviously the first thing you do with everything is like, you say, risk. What's
money.
Risk. Where's the thing? What's it going to come out? How do you cover yourself? How do you protect it? Do that.
You have a huge advantage.
Which is great. There's a lot of stuff that comes out, which I think obviously, but at the same time, this is, the stuff I've done before has been much smaller. This is the first time that it's had sort of real levels of investment in terms of coming in. And budget-wise, we're not talking big budget. It's not huge. It's definitely going to be under the kind of SAG kind of requirements, which is sort of $2.5 million. Definitely going to be smaller than that. So it's not that, but it's still a significant thing, and it's bigger than that. So the honest truth is, I'm entering territory that I don't know, and so
probably non-equity actor. I mean, I don't know if you sign somebody who's big, then you might end up.
Well, yeah, and I think the rules. So if you go with SAG, I believe the rules are that if you're under 2.5 million in terms of budget, then actually the standard scales don't apply.
Right.
So you can negotiate directly with the person. So in other words, so the goal would be to find an actor with a name or some kind of profile that will move the needle from a distribution perspective or a marketing perspective, and then have them come on board. And because they like the concept and they think that it's a worthy project, they will do it for far less than their usual fee to be, which is how, I mean, when you go to Sundance, it's how so many of these, not so many, but a fair number of indie films get people who have got awards or have got big profiles, and they'll show up because they're like, well, I can go for 2 weeks. I'll do shooting of whatever. It's something really interesting, or it appeals to me, or I think it might be nominated for something. And they do that, and they are willing to waive their fee, and they can do that because under the SAG rules.
Because you're under the production limits for SAG. Yeah.
Well, one of the technical things, just kind of jumping back a little bit, you said you actually described 2 different individuals. One's potentially an investor, what we would call a passive investor, and the other is an active investor who may not be an investor at all, depending upon how much activity is involved. So from a technical standpoint, an investor is an individual or an entity that provides financial backing, expecting a return based upon someone else's activity is the typical definition. And then we can go into real minutia about whether they're qualified investors and non-qualified investors. But regardless, in either case, if someone's dependent upon the actions of a third party or another party to bring a return on their investment, meaning get their money paid back, and then some sort of premium on top of that, let's say it's 10% or 5% or whatever the quote unquote consideration is. Because of that trust, it's kind of it's a fiduciary position. Things like we were talking about earlier about having all of your rights lined up correctly are become ultimately important because of that fiduciary relationship. For example, let's say, and it's not in your case, but I've heard of it happening before. Let's say that someone becomes a co-writer on a project. Someone is interested in putting money into the project. Money comes into the project. That's from an investor status, meaning, whatever this producer is doing, that's how the investor is going to get paid back. And the writers blow up and the film is stopped. That's the worst thing that can happen to a film, either
yeah.
at the production stage or at the distribution stage, or not even being able to offer the film for distribution because some of the early paperwork wasn't taken care of, some of the technical aspects, the boring stuff, which is what lawyers are hired to do. So not only are you, you'll say it has gone all the way up to distribution and the distributor gets a cease and desist or some sort of an injunction in place, you're beholden in liability not only to the distributor, but to the investor and potentially the government regulatory bodies, both state and federal in the case of the United States, that may be applied. So it's important to take care of that early paperwork.
Yeah, for sure. So let me ask you guys this then, just something I think that everybody who watches BlackLetter, I try to come up with, what are the 3 big takeaways for independent film production from a legal business perspective? The 3 things that you can't screw up. And I'm using like G-rated words today, but you know what I'm saying. In the film industry, we might use an F-bomb for that. But what are the 3 things you can't screw up? Absolutely, that are important. From, between the two of you, what do you think comes out on top?
I want to hang to the scenario you gave me of a potential true life story type of scenario when someone gets involved. The reason I asked earlier on why did she give up final cut rights is because the final cut rights have to be given to the distributor. They're going to require them,
right,
or it's dead. Project is dead. So
that's a good one. So final cut rights, no matter what the project is, you have to reserve them to the production studio that owns the rights. I mean, maybe bundle that. I don't know. And you guys tell me what you think, but number one thing is own all of the rights.
Own all
to
the rights,
everything. Sure. Copyrights, cut rights. Something that came up at my panel last year were screen credits. Like, make sure you've pre-negotiated those. Apparently one of these films that ended up at Sundance last year, that one of the producers was like, yeah, and we had a huge fight over who got to be a screen credit by themselves and who had to share single cards. Right. It was a huge deal, and apparently it delayed distribution of the film because the fairly famous actors actually that we're talking about that were in this film, ones that I've heard of, which means they must be sort of famous. I know no one. But that held up the whole thing. So I think make sure every I is dotted and T is crossed with respect to rights. And then a rights Bible. That's the other thing I've run into, right? Where in the background, like there's a Hertz sign or something. And, somebody's getting stabbed in front of it or something. You kind of have to work out those things. So own all of the rights and clear all of your IP. Is that one big bundly thing?
I would say
is that too bundly?
It's 1A and 1B.
Okay.
If you're going to bundle them.
All right. So that's 1 and 2 maybe. So one is own all of the rights. And then what's 2? Own all of the final cut rights and copyrights. What's 2?
Sure.
Clearance?
Well, clearance is certainly, because, you were talking about earlier, own all the rights. When I was in-house counsel at National Geographic, I was director of business and legal affairs there. One of the things, it's well known that.
But lemurs always give you releases.
Lemurs,
right?
Lemurs
always give you releases.
Only the lemurs. No, those are the easy ones. The contracts say.
Pandas were a disaster.
I'm just kidding. Yeah.
You will
they're in China.
You will deliver to us a project that has nothing but wholly owned rights, right? Well, inevitably the producer is going to stick in some acquired footage or some acquired music instead of original music or original footage.
Yep.
And so there's a whole clearance process for that. But yes, clearances, and if you have a movie and you want to distribute the movie in perpetuity and you enter into a distribution contract for the distribution of that movie in perpetuity, but your acquired footage rights or your acquired music rights only have a 10-year license, then that can mess things up. So you also have to have the rights tracking.
Okay. So maybe so 1A is own all of the rights. 1B, what'd you say 1? 1 is own all of the rights. 2 is clear all of the rights and have them matched up. So what's 3? What's our big third, Mikail? We'll call on you. What's the most important thing you've produced other films. You're an attorney. What do you think is the third most important thing to do as a producer, not from a creative perspective, but from here's the thing you can't screw up?
Yeah, I would say it kind of feeds into what you guys have said already, but as a general thing for people, and I'm saying this because most people who do this obviously aren't attorneys and don't have a background in it,
sure,
is just make sure every piece of paperwork from the absolute beginning is completely tied up and totally nailed down, and you've got it totally sorted. It's a broad one. I know I'm cheating a little bit by encompassing everything, but
make sure you do everything right.
Make sure everything right. But I can't overstate enough and people don't appreciate it. And it comes down, as you said, I was actually going to pick up a little bit on clearances, but as part of it, scoring, really important. Any songs you use, really important. As you say, any background that you've got in there, any extras, anyone that happens to be walking past. anyone that happens to go and do it.
I have a story. I had a client, a band in DC was my client, and this huge Hollywood production film's trailer comes out on TV. It's like on TV and at the end of films, and you'll know the film. I don't know if I can say it because we settled. But they watched, one of the band members watched the trailer, and it was their song. And they had an agent who was an unlicensed, not really an agent, who had sold the rights to their music to this company without the band's permission and paid them nothing on it. And it was like big enough that it would, $10,000, $20,000 sale for trailer credit, right? And they found out because they saw it on TV. So when you say own all of the rights, that studio was actually in trouble because the agent didn't have the right to do that, and they didn't check with the copyright holders, and the agent didn't. So sort of interesting, but that was a big studio that messed that up. We've shut down film productions for Sony for a sweater.
Oh, wow.
For a Christmas sweater.
Right.
And Sony was like, the production company said they had the rights. They just pointed the finger, and then we went to that production company, and they didn't. But anyway,
Hangover 2 got in trouble as a movie. I think it's sort of the public domain. The Hangover 1, I think, got in trouble because there was Mike Tyson shows up in The Hangover as a cameo.
Yes, that's right.
And his tattoo.
Right.
That
was a big case.
Big issue.
Yeah, they didn't have the rights to his tattoo, the tattoo artist.
Yeah.
And let's say, and it doesn't really matter. I'm going to emphasize, it doesn't really matter if the litigant, the plaintiff that brings a case like that wins or loses. The fact is that they've interrupted something, and it's costing a lot of people money. And so clear that out. It's not a matter really sometimes of winning or losing.
Yeah.
It's the fact that you're in litigation at all.
And I'll tell you guys what movie the sweater one was when we're not on camera, but you'll be kind of surprised.
Yeah.
Same with the music ones. Just interesting what rights that even huge studios screw up. So I guess really yours, and I think I agree. I always tell people, you can't go backwards and get this stuff done. You can't finish production, go to distribution, say, oh, right, we need to get the copyright on that. We need to get the music clearance on that after it's done. You have to get it before you put it in.
Yeah, that's not good form. You don't want to do that.
So I guess early on.
Tom, just to reiterate now, let's go through the 1 through 3 to make sure we have these rights worked out. All right, the 3 takeaways. 1, clear all the rights. Make sure your rights are cleared, right?
Okay.
2, own all the rights. And 3,
get all the paperwork in order right at the beginning and keep it in order.
But
I know it sounds obvious.
Much more exciting than that.
I don't know.
1, 2, 3. Well, I want some exciting points.
I don't know. The third of a trilogy is always a bit of a flop, isn't it? It's tricky.
No, it depends.
I do that one.
We could make it more exciting.
Yeah.
No, I mean, look,
dot your I's and cross your T's.
Yeah,
or dot your T's and cross your I's. Just do both.
I mean, look, what I could say is if you want to do something divergent from that, and if you want to take something separate, which is a bit more specific, I would say make sure that you have all of your performers aligned exactly contractually from the beginning and at the end. Because when you're shooting, and again, this always happens, you always shoot and stuff goes wrong and there's a bit of a delay or there's an issue or someone shows up and they don't behave the way you thought they were going to behave or you had something like that, and the actors will turn up, and people who make any kind of film or theatre or anything like that will know that people don't, it's not everyone shows up for a month beforehand, hangs out, or get on really well, and then you do it. People will turn up 3/4 of the way through.
Absolutely.
They'll be there for 2 days, and they'll be in. And when you do a short film or an indie film, sometimes they're there for a day. And they come in and we need them we have 4 hours to actually get stuff with them. And you do it. And if things aren't aligned and it's not tied up, and it does that, and you lose that time, then you lose that shot. And
when you say things like that to me, in the back of my mind, I'm going, okay, actors on set 2 days. That means you had a letter of intent earlier, and the letter of intent doesn't suffice. You have to have an actual agreement in place. And the investor won't put money in until there's a letter of intent in place. And it has to be binding. The actor doesn't want to sign a binding contract unless you have money in escrow. I mean, there's a
catch-22.
There's a whole litany of things
catch-22
behind these statements that you're making. The huge leverage involved, and it's a complex business. But you know what? It can be overdone. It's overcome every day. Independent filmmakers are great, usually very savvy people. But they need good support as well.
Yeah, no, you do. And I go, not to over-promote the law firm, but I would say, and I always say this, in every business endeavor, anyone that's doing, any of my friends, I'm always like, you can do a certain amount by yourself, you can research things, you can get friends and stuff. Yeah. But it comes to a point where you need to actually just stump up and pay it. And fees for people like lawyers or other consultants that are giving that advice is worth it in the long run.
Yeah. No,
you'll make your money back.
I always say that. So to close out, I think we've got our 3 big takeaways. Do what you do best. If you make movies, make the movie. Don't do the legal part yourself. Thanks for joining us, guys, today on the podcast. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody out there who's watching and listening, for joining us again on BlackLetter. Download us wherever you get your podcast, iTunes, the Play Store, and wherever else you get your podcast. Look forward to seeing you next time. Thanks for joining us in this entertainment law show. Have a great week. That's all for today's episode of BlackLetter. Thanks again for listening. Join us next time when we talk about more BlackLetter issues in creative ways. Make sure you subscribe to the podcast